During his meeting with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and his delegation, U.S. President Donald Trump pulled out an audio-visual illustration of what he deemed as evidence of an alleged white genocide happening in South Africa. The evidence, a compilation video of EFF leader Julius Malema singing the Kill the Boer chant at various rallies and events. Now, without context, the song is open to interpretation. While we can appreciate the history and the meaning of the song, does it become justifiable and enough to bypass global optics and reception as inflammatory? Let's take a look at that moment again.
So these people, when you want to hit them hard, go after a white man. They feel a terrible pain because you have touched a white man. Not because Mashaba and Soli will not be touched. They will be touched, don't worry. But we are starting with this whiteness. We are cutting the throat of whiteness. It's like that. Shoot!
We discuss the relevance of the Kill the Boer song in modern-day South Africa with lecturer at the Nelson Mandela University's Department of History and Political Studies, Dr Ongama Mtimka, and Director for Critical Diversity Studies at Wits University, Professor Melissa Steyn, as well as researcher at the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs, Advocate Sipho Mantula. All right. So as we know, I mean, this was quite a big moment globally, not only in South African history, but also, I mean, a very pivotal moment in our relationship between South Africa and the United States. But it's very important that we look objectively as possible at the song, chant, Kill the Boer. And firstly, I'll start with you. Good morning to all of you. I'll start with you, Dr. Mantula. Do you believe that liberation songs like Kill the Boer remain relevant in modern-day South Africa?
Refreshing morning, Mashaba, and to your viewers and to my fellow panelists. A very important subject during this Africa Liberation Month, that as we talk about the relevancy of the song, it is more of like erasing our historical text and our historical context. The songs of struggles in this country are very important, and they should never be equated or aligned to a certain personality. These songs had a context, and at the same time, as we have said, the global optics. Are we defined by the global optics of Washington? When these songs have a history, dating back to, even if I can take you to 40 years ago in the Delmas trial, that this song was also tried to be penned down against activists in 1985. Now, post-1994, you will understand there were many rulings. But I think the great ruling that came out of 2022 of Equality Court, Molahlehi judgment, is a very important judgment in the sense that it was giving a context of the song and the issue of why there are people who are raising the issue that it is leading to hate speech, inflammatory statements, when actually Africans were maimed, were killed through genocide in this continent and even in this country. So I think the issue of the relevancy of these songs, it is part of the lyrics that were chanted by many liberation movements, but also many academics are starting to document what we call the songs of struggles, izingoma zomzabalazo. And you will hear, my dear sister and the viewers, we will always go to the song Dubuli Punu, but we don't talk about the first line of the song, Ayasaba Amakwala. Very important to can contextualize that song and look at how this song was chanted beyond Peter Mokaba, beyond Julius Malema. I think, like I have said, the song has a context within the African people who were suppressed, downpressed, by the apartheid regime in the early 1900s and even in the late 1990s.
Thank you very much, Advocate. Now, I'll come to you, Dr. Mtimka. Should the international community, particularly countries like the United States of America, have a say in how South Africa interprets and presents its own history and struggle songs?
Good morning to you and your panel. There's a difference between what should and what is. When you wage a struggle, when you wage a strategy, you make a choice as to how you want people who are inadvertently are going to make comments and standpoints about what you do. You make a choice as to what you want to be what you want them to talk about. My view, I think it's a completely foolish idea to keep on giving ammunition to sections inside South Africa who feel who have grievances about grander matters of strategy about transformation in South Africa, one. And two, who feel that the taking away of privilege is an attack on them. To give them something to work with from a strategic point of view to undermine the very more important thing that you are trying to do, which is thoroughgoing socioeconomic transformation. So the White House sees a meeting with the president of South Africa, which represents a country that has got so much to offer to the world. As far as, for example, its approach to citizenship, which is very inclusive, its approach to how you manage transformation after a majority comes into power that was oppressed and now is administering a process of transformation, right? And those things, in fact, are things that are virtuous for us to give to the world as how you do a more humane transformation or socioeconomic transformation. And we choose that the best way in which we want to do that is to sing songs which, even in our own language, by the way, when we look at it from a purely hermeneutic point of view, they give you that opportunity to be criticized as somebody who actually doesn't want the post-apartheid social re-engineering, which for me is more humane and more and nobody is saying sing struggle songs, and people make this to be a general standpoint. No, struggle songs are great, even the ones that talk about violence, for example. So, for example, you got the song about Solomon Mahlangu, who was killing apartheid soldiers up in Africa. Nobody is saying nobody shouldn't sing that song, because in its very lyrics, it's telling history. There are songs which when you could interpret as calling for action, because these songs were sung at military camps to energize soldiers. So for me, let's separate between particular songs and generalities about our heritage.
All right, I'd like to bring you in here, Professor Steyn. What are the key research areas that you are currently exploring, particularly in critical diversity studies in the South African context?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. We aren't working specifically related around struggle songs. If that's what you're asking, that's not an area that we're working on. But let me say this. The kinds of things that we are interested in would be, you know, what kinds of behaviors do we want in a diverse society, so that you can build trust and you can build reconciliation between different groups. What kinds of behaviors do we need? What kinds of actions do we need to build trust? And in that respect, I honestly think that we shouldn't be singing about killing each other. You know, and I mean, obviously I understand that this song is about taking down the structure of white supremacy, and we all understand that. But nevertheless, that's not how it lands. So I think that in terms of building up a society where we can move forward, I don't think that it's helpful. And I think just because the song is legal, as it rightfully should be, that doesn't mean that it has to be sung. And so, and certainly not in the way in which it's being sung at rallies and things like that. So, so I think that it's a question of, just because you can, it doesn't mean you should. You can still choose not to sing that song because it is inflammatory for our nation. But I really do need to say that this is a two-way thing. In many ways, a lot of what happens in these interactions is that we're still playing out old colonial racist narratives. And so the construction of Black people, and particularly Black men, as being dangerous, murderous, desirous, lusting after white blood, that is an old colonial construction. And we have got people in our country who are still subscribing to that colonial narrative. And all the stories that come out of genocide and the emphasis on farm murders as being a kind of violence that is separate from the criminality in the rest of the country, just this sort of like just this acting out of this bloodlust of Black men. That is an old colonial narrative. But then the singing of a song like Kill the Boer plays on that narrative, hooks that colonial fear. And in a way, of course, it feels empowering in the moment to be able to evoke that fear amongst the population group of your previous oppressors. But the point of the matter is it's like a dance. We've got people who are dancing in this country with each other. On the one hand, we've got the people who have this hate-filled fear of Black people, and then we have a group of Black people who poke that fear and activate that fear.
All right.
And as long as we're stuck in this dance, we can't move forward as a country. We've got to move forward. We've got to. Both of those need to be. We need to be working through those and reaching a point. I mean, the fact of believing that the majority or that many African men are just out to murder white people on farms.
All right. Let me bring in the advocate. Let me bring in the advocate here for a second.
Okay,
now,
but
advocate,
I have to say that is hate.
Right. Thank you, advocate. Where do we draw the line? I mean, particularly between preserving free speech and cultural expression versus diplomatic tact when it comes to singing liberation songs, especially in an international setting.
Important question, Mashaba, that you are posing, but look at how Trump also posed that video clip as an ambush. Others, they say it was an ambush to our delegation, but it was not. It was what we'll call a misconstrued, a wrong narrative, even the use of images that were there. So one looks at what you are saying, balancing of rights. Cultural expression, they don't need a text. They are practiced by human beings. Africans by nature, they love song, they sing whenever there is any struggle or anything. So you need to understand that context that I've said. And I think my fellow panelist is correct. There were many songs. And you will recall the PAC revolutionary song also, where it was talking about one settler, one bullet. But when you look at the context of it, it is talking about the settlement or the illegal occupation of South Africa. But they are not pushing or perpetuating what Professor Melissa was saying of this lust and anger and invoking to the, the other.
So yes, in the post-apartheid context, then, has the meaning and the purpose of the liberation songs changed?
You know, Basaba, I won't say they will change looking at the intergenerational young people that we are having and the new political parties that have emerged. They will always go back to the old songs. and they will give them a new narrative in their new context. But the old will always inform the present. And that's how we need to understand that even when you talk about post-apartheid, there's no post-apartheid. We still have remnants of apartheid delinquents in this country. And at the same time, what we see from Trump, what came from Trump, like I said, the posture of how Trump used it, our own liberation and contemporary musicians like Abomam Mirem Makeba, they had songs that they were talking about this plight of a white man supremacy and a white man syndrome that came to this continent. And through a song. So that was not diplomatic. I will tell you it was a soft power, cultural diplomacy. And I think our president should have used it in that session to say that in South Africa, we do allow freedom of expression, but there are limitations. But the limitations are not based on the constitution only, but are based on how people live side by side. And I think that's what we have seen in many political parties. We have different races in many parties. We have different thoughts in this country that we do allow. So I think, Mashaba, for us to balance those rights, we don't need to go to Washington and explain ourselves about our cultural heritage.
Now, let me bring you in here, Dr. Mtimka, on the back of what the advocate has just said. Is there a risk, perhaps, of selective memory or interpretation of South Africa's history by external parties? And how can this be addressed?
You know, nations transfer knowledge for particular across the board. Amaxhosa, Africans throughout the continent are very intentional about what knowledge is transferred and what are the desired outcomes. I am standing firm on the idea that we mustn't take particularities or things that are particular about specific songs and make them to be about the grander heritage of the country. There's nobody who is running a campaign that says don't sing liberation songs. There are people who are running specific campaigns about specific words, not even the whole songs, but specific words. We must make the choice about what knowledge we want to transfer and what particular behaviors we espouse and what we want people to think of us. If you look at the ANC throughout its history, critical self-reflection, in fact, not just the ANC liberation movements throughout history, critical self-reflection, which ponders questions about conduct and strategy, among others, and how they help us advance our cause, have always been at the center. And I think that if we do critical self-reflection, we'll realize that we're spending more time defending things that we shouldn't be even spending time on, precisely because we are making strategic and tactical mistakes. We should be concerned and debating what are the ways in which we can deal with the grievances that make politicians want to exploit these songs. Those grievances are poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And if we deal with those grievances, we are going to set South Africa on the right track. We should also deal with the grievances of people who are feeling like they are losing their privilege. And if you can have external parties that can exploit the sentiments of a domestic population in ways that make Bell Pottinger look like a storm in a teacup with the Guptas, you're sitting on a time-ticking bomb, the same way that having millions of unemployed young people, puts us on a time-ticking bomb. So I think we must be serious as South Africa, call a spade, and and prioritize. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I wanted to ask Julius Malema, in fact, if I could meet him, I would ask him, do you want the world to remember you for singing these kinds of songs? Or do you want to be remembered for the grand ideas you have about how to transform South Africa? And I mean, for me, the choice should be even without any, one being two minds about it.
All right. Now, okay, so coming to you now, Professor Melissa Steyn, you have authored a book titled Whiteness Just Isn't What It Used to Be, White Identity in a Changing South Africa. How do you interpret, particularly in light of the 49, I believe now the number is 59 refugees who have now been given refugee status in America in terms of that transition from, sort of the positions that black people were in to now the position that white people say that they're in?
Well, I mean, it's a ludicrous comparison. There's no possible way in which you can equate what black people went through during apartheid and before, during colonialism, with privileged white South Africans who actually have everything that your heart could desire, basically. And in terms of the inequality between them and their fellow black South Africans, I mean, for them to be called refugees and for them to consider themselves to be victims is completely irrational. But that's the point that I'm making, is that this belief, the colonial belief that they have, that black people want to kill them, is that they're stuck in a colonial narrative. And to them, that feels like reality. It feels like reality. That's what we've got to. We've got to work at debunking that. We have to bring those people into the 21st century with us, to see the absolute inaccuracy of those beliefs. And I want to say, those beliefs are also harmful. They are also hurtful to the majority of our population. Our South Africans have been extraordinarily forgiving and extraordinarily open-hearted to white South Africans who were their previous oppressors. And so for them to be perpetually suspected of being, vengeful, hateful, murderous people who coming to get their revenge on white people, that's extraordinarily hurtful to the majority of our people. And that needs to stop too. So I really strongly feel that we should be talking about both sides of this issue. And that we need to be really working on debunking those beliefs that actually, in some ways, again, create the situation where it feels empowering to sing that song, because you can frighten a whole lot of people.
All right. And now, how do we justify the song in light of the fact that it will continue on the international stage? How do we contextualize it in a palatable way for the global audience? Advocate? All right, Advocate, over to you. How do you think that we can actually contextualize a song for our global counterparts?
Mashaba, I think what we have to seek is the global identity and the role of the global state governance. There is an article that was written by Lisa Garner. And you recall Lisa Garner was one of the witnesses in this case of Julius Malema. And I think why I'm putting that context of that, Mashaba, is that from a song, we must seek a national identity that will unify us. And we should not delete or erase our memory or our songs. It is like censoring our music, what happened during apartheid, the censoring of your reggae music, your African music, that had a context and had a message. So I think, as you said, in the global stage, what we should do is to still emulate our cultural diplomacy. We should give our national a posture as the country. But as Ongama said earlier, we have pressing issues in this country, but through a song, through identity, Mashaba, what are we seeking to achieve? And like you said, these songs will forever follow us because it is our history, it is our heritage. And it is important on the context that when we have to defend them, wherever we are, we must always raise the historical past, the injustices that happened in this country. But we must also move forward because the present generation don't want to be told about the past only. They want to forge their future. So one will assume that in building a prosperous Africa and prosperous South Africa, we must never erase such songs. So long as these songs, we don't become selective on singing them and only taking certain lines. Let us also remember that through a song, there is a healing. Through a song, there is also a part of conscientizing our people. Hence, I said we must seek a national identity and a national consciousness that will build the people of this continent. And one looks at also that when they were contesting this song on the 21st of May, it was a World Day of Cultural Diversity and Development. Have we ever thought of our diversity that is built by song, dance, and heritage and history? So we should never shy away from re-educating people like Trump and Elon Musk, because Elon Musk also has been an instigator of raising all these issues about our liberation songs. Maybe it's high time that we take Elon Musk to Basic 101 about our liberation songs and what context were they chanted and where they are today in the 21st century. Masshaba, remember the TRC hearings where the former President Thabo Mbeki had to defend some of these liberation songs, and he was explaining them in our African languages. Hence, it is difficult to also transliterate our songs to people like Trump who are not even willing to unlearn and relearn.
All right, let me get your very brief parting shots. I'll come to you, Professor Steyn. Firstly, or lastly, and in closing, and very briefly, what role can research in critical diversity actually play in informing policy and practice around issues related to liberation songs and their impact on social diversity?
Masshaba, we have a new book by Professor Lekgotla Larammupi where he talks about Robben Island songs of struggle. We can use more of the literature that comes from our people, the songs that were chanted in the late 1900s, 1960, 1990. It's very important that in our seeking of cultural diversity as Africans, as South Africans, we need to always remember that the power of the music, the power of songs in this country is to always seek unity, is to always seek that togetherness beyond diversity. Masshaba, we need to always know that in our diversity, we must always seek unity. We must always seek national consciousness. So I look at the role of research is to always change the narrative, even to re-educate our politicians. The political education of songs are very important, as well as the media interpretation. How does the media interpret some of the songs? I think sometimes it is better when you bring musicians who will tell you what goes in their mind when they compose a song. A song talks, a song can also liberate. Hence, I said the role of research is to also change the mind of politicians. And let us continue encouraging young people to search and research about our history and culture.
Professor Steyn, what future research directions do you perhaps think are important for studying the role of liberation songs in South Africa's history and ongoing social transformation?
Well, I think that it is very important that we do continue, because obviously, as we're moving forward, we have to understand properly where we come from, and as we can see with these kinds of misunderstandings that we have around songs like this, it's important that we all get to understand the context out of which they came, and the context into which they now land, how they're received now, and how we can use this to build better and stronger understanding between South African people. I think that South Africa in many ways has been leading the way in terms of racial reconciliation and learning to build a non-racial society as far as one can, given the kinds of inequalities and that we have in our country. And I think that if we are to work a lot more consciously and a lot more deliberately with these, with the history of the struggle songs, and educate our people out of those knee-jerk reactions that we have that have to do with unconscious assumptions about each other.
All right.
that will be that is the way for greater maturity of our society.